welcome, Valerie. Thank you for joining this conversation of change with us today. I'll briefly begin by introducing Arthan. So Arthan is a social enterprise dedicated to strengthening the social impact sector in Asia through capacity building and consulting support in human capital, organizational development, and thought leadership. Since inception in 2016, we have worked with 1,000 plus social impact organizations, engaged with 200,000 plus job seekers, curated 50 plus forums with 600 plus speakers and 7,000 plus attendees. Organizations collaborated with include the Rockefeller Foundation, MacArthur, BMGF, and many more. We have launched Conversation of Change series, a video interview series with leading thinkers and practitioners from the field of social impact, dedicated to discussing issues relevant to the impact sector and its future. Now on to our very wonderful speaker, Valerie Leung, a Chinese-American born living in Norway, is a business strategist in digital innovation and sustainability, currently working as an advisor at Xynteo. Before her stint at Xynteo, Leung was working as a senior consultant at Deloitte Digital. She worked on creating business strategies and human experiences that can create a sustainable business through digital products and services. Leung co-founded a crowdfunding platform, Oaseit, to support and track environmental projects to create a green impact. Leung has 10 years of experience as a business and technology consultant, and for the last 6 years, she has been focusing on this through a sustainability lens. She has worked with various organizations like Deloitte Digital, Synchron, and Wells Fargo, among others. She also has experience working across continents in North America, Europe, and Asia. She is passionate about building businesses that can address social, economic, and environmental challenges. In 2021, she started her podcast, Modern Idealist, which brings insights from professionals working in impact space. The podcast explores the journey of a stubborn optimist to navigate through the path of being a responsible world citizen. We welcome you, Valerie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Pranimya.
Now, jumping into our very first question for the day, Xynteo believes that growth that benefits the people, planet, and future is good growth. How does Xynteo tackle the system's challenges while ensuring the good growth of leaders and organizations? Could you describe your role as the advisor at Xynteo?
So Xynteo works to reinvent growth by creating inclusive growth and planet positive growth in a few ways. First being working with senior leaders in organizations to help change the culture, things needed in org design to make the transformation into a sustainability-led business first strategy work. Secondly, we also work with embedding sustainability into the core of the business strategy so that it moves from this traditional way of seeing sustainability and impact, which is often seen as a reporting or cost factor, into a competitive advantage or how the company can reinvent itself so that it is maximizing the use of resources correctly so that it is for and not against the nature, but also for the many and not just benefiting the few people. Onwards to sort of what I do in that role. So often as an advisor, I'm working with my team, and what we do there is to help look at the company and our clients who are often senior leaders, and more often they're even C-suite leaders. And we look at their current positioning in the business. We look at their current operating model. We look at where they want to head going forward, and also where the market is going, and all these different market forces, sustainability and impact wise, to help them really make sense of what is important to them and how they can position themselves best in their coming future.
Thank you, Valerie, for sharing this with us and for the work that's been done at Xynteo. With that, I would like to ask another question. So you have a decade of experience as a business and technology consultant. What made you focus on sustainability in the later years of your career? And how would you describe your career journey into this space along with some key learnings?
Yeah, I actually realized the other day that my journey is actually quite common. So let's see. I first started as a business and tech consultant in the financial services space. And I came across microfinancing, which I'm sure that you guys are much more aware of in India. There's so much more of that in Southeast Asia, other developing economies. So I just was so fascinated by it. But at the same time, I was working in capital markets as my full-time job. So I sort of needed to reconcile that together. At the same time, there was a lot of disruptive technologies happening in this space. So I went and did an MBA, and in my MBA is when I came across sustainability in business and what that actually looks like. Not only did it really strike a chord, in my heart, but also I realized that there's a lot of commercial opportunities in this space. And as I started looking further into it, I only started to realize that it's now becoming an imperative. It's a lot of companies license to operate, if you will. I mean, if you don't embed sustainability or some form of inclusion or planet positivity into your portfolio of offerings, you literally will not have the license to operate in the near future. And, the cancel culture is getting rid of commercial businesses faster than anything these days. So my coming to the field and the field's explosion kind of worked well together, but it's still developing so fast. This whole journey that I've had so far, it hasn't been very linear, as I mentioned, and it's been this beautiful mess. And definitely there are times of misunderstanding the use of impact and sustainability in business. From greenwashing, I've seen senior leaders try to use it in the marketing communications aspect to just pure compliance and let's just do it because we're asked to do, otherwise we'll get fined. And moving from these different formats, I have witnessed sort of not the fullest support in this space, and a lot of people not understanding it. All of us working in this space are passionate people. So we're also diving in heart first, and definitely some key takeaways in that is while I keep my heart open and mind open in the space as the space is developing, also recognize that it's just a really fragmented space right now. There are people who get it on a comms level, from a reporting level, to people who kind of really see the opportunities in creating a holistic and embedded version of sustainability into the core of the way we run our economies.
Thank you, Valerie, for sharing that. And I think the journey that you described has been pretty wonderful. And it's really fascinating to listen to the learnings that you've shared so far. And with that, I would like to ask another question. So this is about your work. So you have worked across 3 continents, North America, Europe, and Asia. And according to these continents' different developmental levels, what advices would you give to, say, a senior or mid-level professional who would want to transition into this space? And one piece of advice to a student who would maybe want to work in this impact sector while residing in such different locations?
I hesitate to give advice because I'm still on that journey, but I definitely have my own opinions and reflections about how I would go about it. I think for people who are in the mid to senior level and who are looking to transition into the space, I would say to leverage your background, in business, in the industry world, whatever you come with before, in this transition, it is a transition. We're not moving straight into the way that it should work. And I think a lot of times people who come from the academic space or the research space, just there's a lot of development in that area about how it needs to be, which is great because we need some frameworks going forward. But in the meantime, we are working with real old businesses, some of them quite dinosaurs, like, you know, and they've been around for a long time. And to change organizations with hundreds of thousands of people, I think we really need people who understand and speak the language of what it was before and now as we go in the future. Keeping in mind that there's still a lot to learn from the space as the space is developing. And I find that if you can keep an open mind and to learn from the younger generation, there is a lot to take in, because I mean, sustainability courses are being taught in school today, right? And they see it, like they understand. So at the same time, we want to leverage what we bring to the table. We want to keep our minds open to those who are, you know, fresh grads or just younger in their career journey. And I think there's a lot to learn from both sides. If I were to, you know, speak to a student today, I'm just thinking, or myself, if I were to speak to myself back in that period, I would probably focus more on finding promoters in my field and people who I want to work with and can learn from. And I've heard this before, and it also works in our field of impact. I think we overlook that value and often think that in impact and sustainability work, it's about knowing impact and sustainability content. While it is, I still think it's really important to find promoters that help you along the way and to be a bit patient, because I think being in this field, like I mentioned earlier, you want to see change that should have been done yesterday, and we're likely to be ambitious, driven people. So to have some patience, but to keep pushing.
I quite like the way that you mentioned, you know, to leverage your background and to also have an open mind. And I also agree there's a lot of learning from the younger generations, especially now that at a school level only, they're actually they're so aware about the climate, the environment, sustainability, which is pretty incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
And I would like to also add that, you know, a lot of times, I think as people transition, people think that the impact sustainability space is made for and only for people who have been in the nonprofit NGO space. I think that's a very sad thinking, or it would definitely be an opportunity missed if we think like that. Because on the other hand, we need people who understand those frameworks, but those haven't been NGOs and nonprofits, they get their funding in a different way. So I think we need to be able to learn from each other if we're going to create a new model of operating.
Very, very well said, Valerie. I totally agree with you on that. And with that, I would like to ask another question. So in a developing country like India, how do you think technology can act as a catalyst to increase the effectiveness of the work done in social impact and curbing organizational level challenges of capacity building?
So I think there's many ways technology can help. But definitely the single most interesting factor that we've seen, I think, in the past decade is the way it scales, and the way that with micro technology forms, software, or even phones, like the whole idea that in some economies you can skip the PC in your digital maturity stage is really interesting. I mean, if you look at a lot of the way it was done for me in the US when I was growing up there, we went through a very linear journey watching different forms of Windows and PC and the different annual changes in the Macs every year in the 90s and throughout till now. But I think if you look at other economies like in East Africa, in Asia and China, they just went straight to the phone, and you can just hop over the PC entirely. And I'm really fascinated by how with technology, you don't have to walk this linear scale of change. When you find out something works someplace, you can take that and then move it to another place. Maybe it starts in India or it starts somewhere outside of India, but it can come into India. Let's go with that route. it starts somewhere else and it comes into India and scales rapidly. And, similarly, I've spent some months in India as well, and understand that it's quite similar in that, everyone has a phone, and everyone is so well equipped in the social platforms of life. And that's also a much more fluid space for people digitally. So I think if we can find solutions that help abroad, and tailor it to a way that works locally, whatever that is, it would help scale that change really fast, whether it is the impact itself, or if it's impact measurement, impact management. All of that is being done today in a very difficult way, from surveys to just using at the most advanced form, it's often in spreadsheets. So I think tech can also help measure impact a lot better and collect data. I think that's a very interesting aspect. I will caveat this and say data collecting, I won't be the first to say that needs to be done carefully and securely and with privacy in mind. But the other is that technology is often seen as a way to remove human interactions. But I think if we focus on where technology can aid and enhance the stuff that we like about human actions, there's a lot of chance and opportunity there, because it's not supposed to take away from our value of our everyday life. And whether if that's going to the shop to talk to the shop owner, we shouldn't get everything delivered to us if you like going to the shop. But maybe it should be the shop should always have the ingredients that you need, or something like that.
Yes, so that's really wonderful to hear, Valerie, and I think I take some really good takeaways. So one is, it definitely is a time of, I would say, digital innovation, and everyone is just so tech savvy. And I like how you mentioned that to not walk a linear scale. And of course, data has a lot of role in helping. Tech has a lot of role in helping with the data collection, and also one should look at tech from maybe a point of view of where it can help in enhancing and aiding humans, rather than, as you mentioned, eliminating them from the race. Thank you for sharing that. And with that, Valerie, I would like to move on to the next question. So this is about the wonderful podcast that you host. So you are the host and producer of the podcast Modern Idealist. We are curious to know what the inspiration behind the title was, and what was your motivation behind starting this podcast?
At the core, it was driven by, my journey, my career journey, and how, as I mentioned earlier, when you're so passionate about creating positive change, that should have happened yesterday. There's a lot of climate injustices, social injustices that need to happen. And it's really different than, this 9-to-5 job concept that you can just leave your job. I mean, most are having a hard time these days with remote work, but it's even harder when your heart is so tied to the work you do. And I started questioning myself, my own footprint in terms of carbon and environmental footprint, but also like, what kind of privileges were I living that others didn't have, and in addition, maybe something that I'm taking away from others. And I'm very mindful about how I operate in my daily life, and what that does for others that are less privileged. And I think that started creating this, paradoxical loop where I didn't understand, like, how do I create change if I'm the sole problem here? And I understand that there's a lot of narrative problems in putting these responsibilities on people. But then at the same time, you need people to drive the public sentiment so that you can get that heard through to policymakers and business organizations. So it's really, it became just too big for me to solve as a single problem. And this is exactly what systems problems are. They're connected, and it just became really hard when my own existence was at the heart of it. And through the pandemic, I had a lot of conversations with my co-host around this. And a lot of it is basically around realizing the fact that, there are certain ideals you want to live in your life to create this positive change, but there are hard realities of life that we need to live up to, like our own wealth creation, bills to pay, mouths to feed, and just things we like, materialistic things that we like. I enjoyed flying around the world to meet my friends and family. Like, that's just something that it's a box I've opened up by, marrying my husband, who is across the Atlantic, and I have family in Asia and US. I've set myself up for a very heavy carbon footprint life, and I need to reconcile that. So I realized that there's no answer. The only answer I have every day is to continue searching. I feel better searching than I don't searching, or than I don't search. And so I enjoy talking to different people with different perspectives. That helps me feel better. And lastly, humor. That's something we really try to bring in the podcast, because humor has really saved me from a lot of very big dilemmas. And sometimes you need to lift yourself out of the problem to help to see it in a clearer light.
Thank you for sharing that, Valerie. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful to listen to this outlook from your end, and it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you about this. And I'm sure we'll maybe have like a separate conversation that is just talk about this podcast.
I'm so down for that.
With that, I would like to ask a personal question. So, having extensive experience in digital innovation and sustainability, what has been your relationship with work, and how do you find a balance between work and life?
Like most people, so as I've heard from some, I don't. And I mean, the podcast has been a really big answer for me, as I mentioned earlier, because the work life is only one part of it. The other is purpose. You have to balance the work you do, which is sometimes just work. And then you have a life, which is like all these other things that you set yourself up for. If you have kids, you have to pick up your kids. You have like parent duties. You have household family duties. And then if you've got purpose as well in there, like us in this line of work, you also question yourself, am I bringing purpose today to work and to my everyday? I don't really find the perfect balance, but I just find being open-minded and continue searching, being sort of a student of life, still the answer at the moment, and a thinker. Sometimes working in our fields, we need moments where we think fast, and we need moments where we think slow. And what I mean by that is agility is important when work needs to be done and action needs to be taken. But sometimes if you take actions all the time, you don't actually think about how things are connected. And it's like, at the end of the day, you don't even know how that weighs out in a net positive or net negative way. So I really appreciate, for myself, I extra appreciate being able to sit back, reflect, and talk about it with humor.
Thank you for sharing that, Valerie. And with that, we come to the end of our conversation. It's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you about your experiences, the advice that you've given, and also living a life of purpose, thinking, and taking some time to also reflect. It's been absolutely wonderful, Valerie, speaking to you. Thank you again for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I always like talking about this kind of stuff.